All right, everybody. So welcome to our white belt demo class. My name is Gabe Chapa. I'm going to be your instructor for today. Thanks for coming out for a short period of time. Like I told you just before I started the recording, this is only for maybe 2 hours. So I wanted to make sure that everybody understood how it's going to work, the basic schedule. So because it's such a short period of time, unlike our traditional classes, which run a full day, like if we were here for a full day, it'd be like 8 to 4 Pacific. We won't have a need for the hour lunch or some breaks in there since we're only here for a short period of time. All right, and I'm going to go a little further than what I anticipated initially. This is kind of born out of used to have a 1 hour like lunch and learn. Maybe you've been to those before, those 1 hour sessions at work where you learn a little bit about a topic and get excited about it and want to do something with it. That's kind of what this is, a little bit to a certain extent, but I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into what goes into this, right? Because rather than just doing the 1 hour, hey, here's what Six Sigma is, have a great day, enjoy the rest of your weekend. I do want to talk a bit about what goes into the green belt and the black belt courses, right? So if you're thinking about, hey, I want to get certified, maybe you might want to know what you've got to do to get that done. Okay, so there's only a handful of instructors that teach Six Sigma and all the New Horizons. So I've been doing this for quite some time. I've been involved with Six Sigma for about 10 years. So I am a black belt if you're familiar with Six Sigma. Been one since April 15th of 2013. So what is that, almost 9 years or something like that? So anyway, let me give you a bit of information about what we're going to do today. First, before I begin, I always make sure that every class I teach, that every single person has my contact information. So there you will see in the top of the screen in red my email address. And I'll put this in the chat box too. So gchapa@nhlearninggroup.com. That's how you can find me. It'll tell you a few things about me there as well. In addition to the email address, if you're a LinkedIn user, which I would imagine most of you are, if you got an invitation through LinkedIn or you saw the little notification about, hey, this webinar is going on or this class is going on, you're welcome to find me there and connect. In fact, I'm putting in the chat box my link, my direct link to my profile. Or if you want to go out to LinkedIn and find me, look for Gabe Chapa or Gabriel Chapa Jr., my full name. That same mugshot you see there on that slide, that's me. Yeah, it'll also be on my LinkedIn profile. It'll tell you all about my past, that I'm originally from the state of Texas, that I graduated high school in 1985, spent a couple of years at community college, spent 7 years in the Marine Corps. As you see at the bottom, veteran of the United States Marine Corps, was a disc jockey at a classic rock station. So if I ever sound like a radio announcer today, that's the reason why. I worked at Experian, the credit company, for about 12 years. And I've been with New Horizons for, about a dozen years now. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a background of my history. So please, find me and connect if you don't mind. Anyway, it'll tell you here on the slide here a little bit about me. I teach a bunch of different courses since I've been here for a while. I teach our white belt class, demo class like this, the yellow belt, green belt, and black belt certification courses. I do teach all of our Office applications. I am a Microsoft certified trainer and an Office Master Specialist. So I teach everything Office: Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Access Publisher, and OneNote. Every version of Office from Office 95 up to the current Office 365 and everyone in between, which also means I do teach 365. I do teach Microsoft Teams and things like SharePoint, SQL, QuickBooks, Windows, Adobe Acrobat, Microsoft Project. I teach, obviously, our Six Sigma courses, some of our project management classes. I teach our intro to cybersecurity class. So many different hats I wear in our company. But today, one of my favorite things to talk about is Six Sigma. At the bottom there, it does tell you I have experience through my different career, path, working at Experian, working in the Marines, where I've got experience with process improvement, project management, and it does tell you there I've been an instructor since 2010. I've won several awards as a trainer. Those are based on student evaluations. And of course, the most important thing on that slide to me would be at the very bottom, that I am a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. I was in during Desert Storm and Desert Shield, by the way, just so you know. What you're looking at here is an old platoon sergeant. Of course, I don't teach my classes the way a Marine sergeant would, right? A lot of yelling, a lot of crying, a lot of screaming, you can imagine, right? At my age, I'm 54. I'll be 55 this coming August. Been married 29 years, got 3 kids. I'm the one doing all the crying and the screaming at this point in life. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the day with me. I want to give you an idea of what we're going to be talking about. These are the topics over the course of our day today. So my goal is this. I'm kind of thinking It'll take about an hour-ish or so to go through all the materials, right? But I also want to give you some handouts. At the end of all this, I'm going to give you a link, and actually, I can give you a link here. Yeah, at the end of the day, when we get to the finished part, I'm going to give you a link where you can download this slide deck that you're seeing right now in front of you. So this PDF, it's about 49 slides. You're welcome to come get it and download it. I made it available in my OneDrive account, and I'll have the link for you toward the end. Now, I know inside of the website, it mentioned in there, or it said something along the lines of, hey, there's no test really that goes with this. And that's because we really don't have like an official white belt certification, right? Everything with New Horizons starts with yellow belt, right, which is the 2-day class. Then they go green belt for the 4-day class, and the 5-day class is black belt. And for that, you would have an actual certification exam. But we do have a little small practice test if you'd like to try it out. And I'm not sure, I don't remember if they give you a certificate at the end of that, but it's only like 10 questions just to kind of say, hey, is this something that's kind of like for you? So I'll make sure you have that link at the end. So if you want to try it, you certainly can. You don't have to, but it's there. Also, I'm going to ask you at the end of our class to fill out an evaluation for me on the website that you logged in through. Just wait till the very end. And really what that's for is just to kind of let us know, hey, how did you enjoy this? How did you enjoy the training that you're seeing? How did you enjoy your time with me as an instructor? Those kinds of things. Sound good? That's what we'll do. So as far as topics go, here's what we have. You'll notice there it says at the top, we're going to cover what is Six Sigma. We'll get through the history of Six Sigma. We'll talk about the transfer function, that Y is a function of X, that approach that you see there, something that every Six Sigma practitioner should really be familiar with. We'll discuss the methodology. Maybe you've heard before of DMAIC, right? Define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. We'll get into some of the roles and responsibilities, those that are involved with the Six Sigma world. We'll talk about the history of Lean, because, it's Lean Six Sigma. So there's Six Sigma, and there's also the lean portion of this. And then we'll discuss what the 7 deadly muta are, right? Waste, right? How you're trying to find waste in your process to make it more efficient, right? Get rid of that. So we'll do that. I'll open up the floor for questions. Of course, I know it says questions at the end. I'd like you to kind of hold off on that, but if there's something you really, really got to know as I'm right in the middle of it, you're welcome to type it in the chat box. So that way I can kind of keep training for a bit, and then I can stop and address your questions that you might have. Of course, if you find it easier to turn your microphone on, that's fine, but do keep in mind, I would ask you to wait until I get to like a stopping point and then ask the question. So that way we don't like get completely derailed off our train today, since we're in such a short window, okay? All right, that being said, let's just dive in, shall we? Let's talk about what exactly is Six Sigma and get into some of this. So first and foremost, what exactly is Six Sigma? Well, Six Sigma can kind of be broken up into 2 parts. There's Sigma, and then there's the Six, right? And when we talk about Lean Six Sigma, there's Lean, and there's the Six Sigma. So Sigma effectively is standard deviation, right? And if you're familiar with working with basic algebra, getting into like mean, median, mode, standard deviation, variance, and some of those different terms, sigma effectively means standard deviation. And why do we use this? Because it gives us an opportunity to see, what's normal in a process. So think about this for a second. When we talk about a process, what is it? A process is anything that you do that has a definitive starting point, a definitive ending point, and there's steps along the way that you must follow to make it happen. Like I've been sitting here this morning drinking my cup of coffee, and forgive me if I sip once or twice during class this morning, because I do this in every class, right? Drinking something. But I'm thinking about making a pot of coffee. There's a starting point for that. There's certain steps you have to follow along the way to get to the end result of your pot of coffee or your cup of tea, right? And if you don't follow those individual steps, right, if you don't get those things all done, guess what? You don't end up with the finished product, whether it's a product or a service of any kind. So what we're trying to do is this with Six Sigma. We're trying to ensure that every time you perform the process, we get the same result, the same output. That's really what this is all about. When what they mentioned right there on the slide, you're going to come to learn that variation is the enemy of any quality process. Well, a quality process literally is you get a result that you expect. That's what it is. If I'm going to make a pot of coffee, I want to, every time I go get that cup at the very end, I want to know exactly what I'm getting. I mean, that's part of the reason why people go to McDonald's. Think about it just for a second. Do you go to McDonald's because it's the greatest food in the entire world? Maybe you want to go for the fries. But honestly, it's not because it's the greatest food. It's the process that they refined. In fact, if you really want to see a good movie about that, there's a movie on Netflix that it might still be there. It's called The Founder with Michael Keaton that kind of talks about how that was all started. But they even go through the process of, hey, here's how we're setting up our restaurant. Here's where the different stations are. Here's the most efficient way to move people around so that the product goes from point A to point B to the customer. How can we make our time, our delivery time, from the time the customer orders so they receive their food? What's the best way to do this and the most efficient way to do this? So they are trying to ensure that every time they perform the process, it doesn't vary. It's always the same. That's what we're trying to do with Six Sigma. We're trying to minimize that variation so that every time you run your process, you know what you're going to get. Now, a process is perfect? Absolutely not. Things are going to change, right? Equipment's going to wear out. Weather might influence something. You'll have new people coming in that might be not so sure about how to do something, right? There's always going to be something there, quality materials. There's always something that's going to potentially cause your process to not perform as expected. But if we can minimize those occurrences, we're going to have a better, more consistent quality product or service. And Six Sigma is the goal. Right? The 6 is the goal, the aspiration of process performance we're trying to get to. So the goal of our Six Sigma process is for every time we perform it, the average result of our process should have, at minimum, 6 standard deviations away from the customer's high and lower specifications. Now, if you look at the slide right here, I'm going to kind of zoom in on this. You'll see right there how they mention, all right, I have this lower specification limit here of 33.75. Here's one of 34.25, the upper specification limit. Those are usually provided by a customer. So let's say this is, I don't know, this is a company that wants us to build doll houses. And they're asking us, okay, we're going to put together this kit and we want you to drill the holes for us in this kit. So that way, when a father and their child are putting together, or mother and their child are putting together this dollhouse, the bolts are going to fit through the hole, right? So that you can fasten it up. And now we have a solid dollhouse to work with. And we need to make sure that each and every time the holes are no bigger than 34.25 millimeters and no smaller than 33.75. So can you do this for us consistently? Because if you make it bigger than that size, the bolt going to slide right on through. It won't stay. If you make it too small, you'll never get that bolt through the hole. So the question becomes, can you drill consistently with that size right in the middle if at all possible? Well, by having such a refined measurement, like I said, not all processes are perfect. What happens if it gets to be a little bit too big, a little bit too small? Well, it's fine as long as we can stay within what the customer tells us is allowable. That's what we're trying to achieve. So as it says, a process whose average is about 6 standard deviations away from the customer's high and low specification limits, it has room to float before it gets to where the customer specifications are. As long as it stays with what the customer tells us they want, we're good. If it goes beyond that, yeah, now we have a problem because your customer is going to see that, go, wait a minute, that's too big, can't use it. Or that's too small, can't use it. But if you can stay within those specifications consistently, customer is happy, you're happy. A Six Sigma process only yields 3.4 defects for every million opportunities. What does that mean? That means if you're at that level of precision, 99.9997% of the time, your products are considered defect-free. So that's what the Sigma level means, that number. And by the way, there's not just Six Sigma. There's 5 Sigma, 4 Sigma, 3. You'll see that in just a second. However, here's the problem with this. Not every process can achieve that level of precision. There's always going to be variables in there, right? If you have people in there, right, that's always a possibility that they're not going to be perfect. I mean, I'm not, absolutely not. I tell my kids that I am, but my wife, she just laughs. That's how it is. But yeah, your process, depending on what the customer tells you, they may not give you enough wiggle room to work in there to make your process that efficient. This table that you see on page 11 kind of gives you a good idea of the different Sigma levels. Notice as you start at Sigma level 1, how the defect rate is 69.76%, almost 70%. But as you go up to Sigma 2, Sigma 3, Sigma 4, the higher you go, the lower the defect rate. That means the more often that your product or service is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. The output's right. So what if you have a 1 Sigma level? Defect rate of 70%, right? That means that your process, whatever you're creating or doing, you're only going to meet those customer requirements 30% of the time. Defect free. Is that good enough? I mean, I can only think of one place really where being 30% successful is considered a good thing. And that's hitting a baseball, right? 300 hitter. You do that for your career, you'd probably be in the Hall of Fame. But 30% success rate if you're being operated on, no thanks. I don't think I want that doctor to work on me. If you're 3 Sigma level, right? 3 Sigma level means 7% defect rate. That translates into 93% of the time, your process is performing as expected. Is a 93% success rate on what you need from a customer or a product or a service, is it good enough? It depends. I mean, if you look on this slide right here, number 13, they mention in here, look, these are the things that would happen if you had a 3 Sigma level process, that 7% defect rate. No computer would run. I mean, you're probably familiar with the blue screen of death, I would think, right? That blue screen on a Windows computer that says something went horribly wrong. Yeah. 54,000 checks lost each night by a single bank. Almost 500,000 incorrect call details recorded each day by a regional telecommunications company. I mean, there's so many things that could go wrong. So 93% sounds like it's good until you realize, wait a minute, this may not be good enough. And who decides what's good enough? The customer. If you take one thing away from all this today, if you're trying to figure out, okay, as I'm doing all this work and I'm putting all this stuff together, who's your audience? Who is this being done for? Remember the old phrase, the customer is always right? Well, if you're doing things with a customer in mind, right at the end, by the way, the customer is the people or persons that are going to use your product or service. So why not make it something they're going to want? Customers will tell you if they're happy or not with you. They'll buy your products, they won't buy your products. They'll use your services, they won't use your services. They'll happily tell other people, hey, this is awesome, you should go try this. Or they'll tell people, yeah, no, don't go with them. They have horrible service. They have horrible products. What about a 1% defect rate? Especially nowadays, man, with these things, people can get out there and get online and post, negative things go viral way faster than positive does. The word spreads. What about a 99% success rate, which is a 1% defect rate? Look at that. Unsafe drinking water about 15 minutes a day. 5,000 incorrect surgical operations per week. No electricity for about 7 hours a month. Man, that would kill my kids. What? I can't play online? I can't talk to my friends? I can't watch movies? Yeah, go outside. They're out there. So even at a 1% defect rate, some processes would be considered unacceptable to you and to many others. So remember, Sigma level is the measure and 6 is the goal. Hey, by the way, these slides that I'm kind of showing you right now, this is giving you a taste of the kind of content you would see in our yellow belt, our green belt, our black belt courses. Okay. And yes, I know I'm doing some lecture right now because that's the design of this particular session. But in our classes, we also do a lot more interaction. There's some exercises to do, stuff like that. So today is primarily, hey, let's take a look at what's out here, just to give you a little bit of a taste of this. And hopefully you enjoy this. What about the history of Six Sigma? Six Sigma, the term itself has been around since the 80s. Motorola, maybe you've heard of them before, the Motorola company. Right. I remember when I was a kid, Motorola used to make pagers, or back then we actually called them beepers, right? And these Motorola products were always like poor quality, right? They were never really all that great. They would break, you drop the pager, boom, it shattered. Seemed like there was always something going wrong. They were not really known for making the best quality stuff until this guy named Bill Smith, who was a quality manager, right? He realized, wait a minute, if we can make the process more consistent, remove the variation in there, we can make a more consistent product. We can improve the quality of our product, because rather than waiting until the product gets out the door and gets to the customer, we can check on its progress as it's being created, like little checkpoints along the way. And if something goes wrong, we have a chance to correct it. So we minimize the amount of waste. We improve the quality of the product going out to the customer. And he got so excited about that, he went to Bob Galvin, the CEO of Motorola. By the way, Bill is also known as the father of Six Sigma, because he's the person that kind of, got this whole ball rolling. Bob got excited. He's like, can you teach other people in our company to do this? Sure. And that's where Motorola University was born. And that's where it all began. Simply because the CEO wanted all the other departments in the company to learn about, how do I do this too? Now, Six Sigma, I've been around for a bit. Actually, go back for a second. You'll see at the bottom there how it talks about GE and Jack Welch, who was the guy in charge of GE at the time. GE noticed, this guy Jack noticed, hey, wait a minute, Motorola's getting better. What are they doing over there? So he went over there and he found out about this Six Sigma, and he said, you know what, I'm going to bring this back over here to our company, because we can do that too. It doesn't look hard. We can do it too. So you know what he did? He brought Six Sigma back to GE and he implemented it. And the way that he did it was kind of ingenious. He took the executives, right, at his company, and he said, okay, you're going to implement this. And by the way, your salaries are going to be tied to directly how well this works. So you implement it, you do better, you're going to get paid that way. You don't implement it, kind of stay where you are, or don't do so well, your pay is going to suffer. He also published the results of how each of these departments did with their Six Sigma implementation in the annual shareholders report. So now he had peer pressure going on. Hey, I see Bob over here is doing Six Sigma and doing great. I see Mike over here is not doing Six Sigma, and not doing so well. So now everybody sees it on paper. So Mike, what's going on here? Why aren't you using this? Why can Bob do it, but you can't? So it was kind of smart the way he did that. And of course, because we're talking about Six Sigma, and you always hear about Lean Six Sigma, there's the other side of the house, lean manufacturing. First thing I will tell you about lean, the letters L-E-A-N do not stand for less employees are needed. I've heard that before. It's like, that's not the idea. Six Sigma is all about, let's get that variation and minimize it and make your process more consistent, right? Lean is elimination of waste, but that doesn't mean elimination of people. If you can make your process better and more efficient, streamline it, and not need as many people to perform it, guess what? As a company, you now have trained employees who know your company, who could be utilized somewhere else. Maybe there's another project that you couldn't do because you didn't have the people or the funding to hire somebody new. Pretty nice. Lean's been around for a lot longer, though. Been around for a lot longer than Six Sigma. So Lean actually started way back with Henry Ford, right? And the assembly line. If you think back to like the Model T, it's kind of where it all began. So it began way back in that time frame, in that environment, and it really didn't take off until later in Japan, right? Back when they were kind of rebuilding their country a little bit, and they could start from scratch as far as like, hey, let's put together these, rebuild our industry, and they incorporated what they called, which eventually became the Toyota production system. Kichiro Toyota and Taiichi Ono, right? Those are the two guys that kind of spearheaded it. And that's why if you ever look at lean manufacturing, a lot of the terms that you see in there are Japanese words, because they come from there. They took what Ford did and they kind of built on it. They used it as a base and said, hey, we can take this, but we could also tweak it to do that, or tweak it to do this. And that's why you hear all these Japanese terms when it comes, the words, right? When it comes to the Toyota production system. If I get the words out. Anyway, these have been both together for quite some time now, and they kind of work hand in hand. And of course, when it all got started, people are like, this is just a fad. People aren't going to use this. But yeah, they did. In fact, nowadays, knowing Lean and knowing Six Sigma or both together, it's a highly desirable certification to have. Because so many companies nowadays, especially today, I mean, think about how the world is today. People are trying to do as much as they can with what they have. All right, so I'm pausing for just a brief second. It's about a half an hour in. It's about 8:30 Pacific. And before I continue and get into the transfer function, I typically, in my classes, always like to stop periodically and just kind of check in, just to say, hey, how are you doing? How are things going? So if you'd like to respond like in the chat box or use the emojis like the thumbs up, those kinds of things, just want to make sure you're doing fine, that you're getting some good information, that you're enjoying what you're seeing. So just if you wouldn't mind, just in that chat box or thumbs, just want to make sure you guys are good. I do this every class because, sometimes I got 5 people, sometimes I have 20 people in a class, and I can't really see you, right? We're all over the country today. So that's how I kind of gauge, how's it going? How's your morning going? Hopefully you're doing good. And since it's Friday morning, maybe you're already thinking, all right, weekend's not too far away. Plus it gives me a chance to sip some coffee. That's always important. At least to me, that's important, right? It's like, well, yes, I've got my coffee, thanks. All right, let's keep on going because I got a bit more to do. And like I said, I want to show you a few things. Now, just so you know, I'm not really necessarily doing it here, but during my live classes, I also like to supplement my course with videos. So I'll put videos up on the screen and play them just to kind of, because it's nice to be able to see some of this versus just talking about it. So, kind of give you a visual point of reference so that way you go, oh, that's what it is or what we're talking about. So anyway, continuing on, like it says, we're on slide 22. So we're not too far down the road. Oh, actually, we kind of are, but I'm trying to break this up into sections. So what about this approach, this transfer function is what this is called. If you use Excel, which, I would anticipate probably some of you do, maybe you're familiar with functions, things like sum, average, max, min, a mathematical calculation, right? Basically, it sits there and says, all right, I want to add all these cells together in Excel. I want to go from here to here. Let's add them all up. Let's use this function called sum that would grab them all and add them together versus this cell plus this cell, right? That's kind of what you're doing. Well, this is a calculation. And the transfer function, as it says, is a mathematical expression of the relationship between the inputs and outputs of a system. So y is a function of x is the relational transfer function that all Six Sigma practitioners use. So here's what they're talking about. The y is the measure or the output of a process. So basically, in any process, right, in order to start trying to improve it, it has to be measurable. Like if you're going to lose weight, what's the most common metric that you're going to look at? Probably going to be pounds, right? You're going to step on a scale, look at the scale for a second and go, yeah, no. You're going to step on it again and go, maybe. Step off 2 or 3 or 4 times just to kind of, because you don't believe it, that scale lies. So yeah. So when you're looking at a process, anything you're trying to change, first thing, is it measurable? How are you going to measure it? And the measurement that we focus on the most is known as our primary measurement or our primary metric. It's the main measurement that we're trying to improve. And that could mean increase it. It could mean decrease it. Depends on what improvement means in the eyes of the person who's doing this, working on this process. So the y is the measure or the output. Function of x, x's are the individual factors, the inputs that affect that y. So effectively, your statement reads, y is a function of x. So think about it this way, cause and effect, input, output. That's what this is. So in the simplest terms, as it says right there in the slide, my process performance is dependent on certain x's. And the objective of Six Sigma is this, to look at all those x's, all those causes or inputs, and figure out which ones have the most influence on that output. So if I adjust them, they adjust the process. They adjust the metric that I want to improve. Here's an example of this. It's Friday, right? What do people like to do on the weekend? Order pizza. I mean, I do. I'll order pizza any day, but Friday, yeah, it's kind of nice because, end of the week, everybody's tired, want to kick your shoes off, relax a little bit, been dealing with the family and the kids. So nobody wants to cook. So what's an easy thing to do on a Friday evening? Have some pizza, relax, start your weekend. So what if you're in charge of a pizza delivery company? This could be anyone. And if you think about ordering pizza from a customer's perspective, one of the things that you might care the most about is, hey, when I order this pizza, I don't want to wait forever for it. I want to get it as soon as possible. So we as a company might decide, okay, the measurement is how often do we deliver our pizza on time to our customers? And that could be measured, in this case, in a percentage. Just so we know, are we getting it done 80% of the time, 90% of the time, 10% of the time? I need to know this. So if my Y, if my output is the how often are we on time, that percentage, the X's would be every single variable that could influence our on-time deliveries. And at the moment, this is all brainstorming. We're hypothesizing as to what we think it is. We don't really know. This is where you kind of take, I think it's this, and you throw it on the wall and hope it sticks. But they give you a couple of examples here. What can influence your on-time deliveries? Well, traffic could be an issue. That might be number one. Could be the number of deliveries per driver, right? Driver goes out, they're taking 4 or 5 orders versus 1 or 2. It might take longer to get to you depending on where they're driving around to. Could be the accuracy of the directions provided to the driver. Nowadays, not such a big deal. Got GPS. I mean, heck, most people like me use your phone to figure out where you're going. You might look at the reliability of the delivery vehicle. And it could be other things too. It could be the weather. It could be maybe when somebody placed the order, they changed their mind. I mean, there's a lot of different things in there that could be it. That's why you see X1, X2, X3, because right now we're just brainstorming and saying, here's what we think it is. And that's really what it is. What do we think is going on here? We don't know for sure. So we throw them all together. And the plan here is to take all those X's and whittle them down until you get to what they call the critical few. And how do you whittle them down? Every single X has to be validated. You sit there, you could even put this on a fishbone diagram and look at the X and say, okay, does this X impact the Y? All you care about right now is a yes, no, not this X influences the Y by this much. That's not what we're caring about right now. What we care about right now is it's either yes or no. If I modify this X, will it make a difference on my Y? And usually you're going to have some kind of data-driven analysis. You're going to do some kind of testing. You're going to look at some kind of numbers to be able to determine yes or no. Because the goal is to, if an X, an input or a cause, if it doesn't do anything to the Y when you change it, remove it from the equation. Why spend our time trying to fix something that's not going to make any difference regarding our output? But if it's something that matters, yeah, you whittle down. You know why? So you focus your efforts. So you focus your efforts on making the right changes to the root causes. This is all, in a nutshell, it's root cause analysis. What are the real causes here influencing my output? And yes, we do talk more about that in our class. We look at fishbone diagrams. We get into different kinds of charts to play around with that, just so you know. The methodology, we mentioned that Six Sigma is the goal, not the method, right? We're just talking about what we're supposed to strive for, but not how do we get there. That's what the methodology is. The methodology, in order to achieve Six Sigma, you could do a couple of things. You could try to minimize your process variation, make it as refined as possible. So that way, if it does fluctuate, it stays within the customer specifications. And depending on what the specifications are, you might even adjust the average of your process. You might shift it a little bit to stay centered between the customer specifications. If you can do those things and keep your process stable and in control, meaning that in the past it performed as expected, you can achieve Six Sigma. And the way you do it is through the systematic methodology known as DMAIC. DMAIC, a systematic and rigorous methodology. And all that really means when they talk about methodology, there's no shortcuts, right? You have to follow every step. It's like a checklist. You got to do every single step in the right order, make sure all of your T's are crossed, all your I's are dotted. That's what they're talking about. There's no, hey, we think here's what's going on and let's jump right to the solution. You can't do it that way. Because if you do that, you might totally bypass the real root cause, the real thing that's causing that why to be the way it is. So it's, I guess another way to say it is it's painstaking. You got to put the legwork in to make this work. So that's why they say it's systematic and rigorous methodology that you can apply to any process in order to achieve Six Sigma. One common misconception is that Six Sigma only applies to manufacturing. That's not true. You can apply the concepts of Six Sigma to any kind of process. It doesn't have to be, hey, we're in a warehouse, let's kind of make this, make sure this is all nice and neat. No, that's not it. Everything around you a process. If you think about it just for a second, everything. I mean, think about this morning. When you got up this morning, got out of bed this morning, do you have a routine? That's your process. I was talking about making a pot of coffee. That's a process. Picking a movie on Netflix, walking the dog, feeding the cats, making a sandwich, changing a tire, washing dishes or washing clothes. Every single one of those is a process. There's a starting point. There's an ending point. There's steps that you follow along the way in a specific order to make it happen. And that leads to some kind of conclusion, some kind of an output. I mean, if I was going to take a day off at work, it's nothing physical. I go on my computer, I go online, I submit a request. Hey, here's what I want to do. My boss sits there and looks at it and says, okay, let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at your schedule. Let's take a look at how much time off you have that you can take. He's doing all of that part of his process to determine whether or not, yep, you can take it. Nope, you can't. So even though we're not physically really, moving anything or doing anything like that, like a warehouse might be, that's more of an administrative process. So you can apply stuff like this to any process. So the 5 phases, by the way: define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And we're going to talk about those here just for a second. So by the way, a lot of what you're seeing right now in these slides is what we cover on the first day in the define phase. So each phase has its own purpose. Each phase has its own deliverables. Each phase has its own requirements. And as it mentions, if you take the yellow, the green, the black belt courses, you're going to be heavily exposed to all these different concepts and tools and examples of the DMAIC methodology. What I'm going to do here at the end of this is I'm going to show you a couple of slides that show you the actual topics that we cover in our class. I'll focus on the green and the black belt courses, because that's usually where you get people coming in taking classes. Yellow belt's kind of nice, but yellow belt is more the managerial kind of view, right? Because it gives you the high level overview of Six Sigma, but you don't really dive into all the individual tools and try some of the different exercises that you do in green and black. By the way, green's a 4-day class, black is a 5-day class. And I'll talk about some of the requirements for certification there too. That's why I said I'm going to expand beyond the slide deck here that I normally would do in a webinar. But at the end of all this, at the end of taking this kind of training, the goal is to be able to apply DMAIC. So as I mentioned, Six Sigma follows that methodology. Basically, it's the 5 phases of a project. So if you think about like in project management, right? You have a project and you have different phases that you follow. Usually it's the planning phase and the execution phase, and you're going to end up at some point closing out the project, and in the middle there you might keep looping back and forth just to make sure things are working the way they're supposed to, right? There's usually about 4 or 5 different phases in project management. This kind of follows some of that. It's another method to follow. So let's talk about these for just a brief second here, just to give you a chance to see what some of these different phases are. Okay, and every project begins with the define phase. The define phase. Effectively, this is where you say, hey, we have a problem. We got a problem going on here. So the define phase is where you establish this foundation for the problem. And every successful project, as you see right in the middle of that slide, right here in the center, it mentions right there, every project begins with the current state challenge. Effectively, that means what's the problem that we're facing right now? Where is it today? And it has to be articulated in a quantifiable manner, right? Meaning that you don't just want to say, hey, we have a problem going on right now. But if you have an issue at work with a process, as it says, you can't just know what the problem is. You got to quantify it. You got to say, why is it so important? Why is it so important that we do something about this? Oh, and at the end of all this, once we're done modifying this process and getting it where we want to be, where should it be at? What's the goal that we're trying to achieve? You know, every time I do one of these, every time I do a define phase, one of the first things we do, and I don't know if they mentioned here in the slides or not, we do what's known as a project charter. A project charter is simply a document. And the purpose of the document is just to kind of say, hey, look, here is where we are. And I'm going to show you an example of one of these. If you give me just a second here, I'm going to pop out of that slide for a second. I'm going to show you an example of a project charter. This is just a template that I have. And I know we're in a live class, so I can drop this in the chat box so you guys can see it. But it looks something like this. It's just a simple document that's designed to say, hey, here are the most important aspects of your project. You know, what is the project? Who's the person that's leading the project? This would be the black belt, you know, the black belt or the green belt or the master black belt. You know, what is the date that this project's kicking off, their contact information. And then right in the center, as you can see there, they talk about the problem statement. So like I said, I'm supplementing a little bit from the slide deck here. So we discuss this more in class, but effectively the problem statement is your declaration of what the problem is. And every problem statement touches on these 5 things. The baseline, where are we at today? So think about this for a second. If you're like me and you're thinking, man, my clothes are a bit tight and I might want to lose some weight. You know, weight loss is a great topic for a project. You know, you don't have to do one for certification, but it's nice to know that you can put these products together. So the baseline would be, okay, where are you at right now? So I went to the doctor here about, a couple of weeks ago. You know, I had gotten sick, and because of being sick, I had developed a lingering cough. So I went to the doctor to get, checked out, get some medication for it. And while I was there, I got weighed and I got told, hey, you weigh 198 pounds. And I kind of went, because usually I like to be in the 185 to 190 range. So that tells me, maybe a little bit too much Super Bowl food while I was sitting at the house or at the, hanging out. So the baseline would be, okay, where's your problem at today? Well, right now I weigh 198 pounds. Well, the goal would be, all right, once you modify your process, where should it be at? Well, I'd like to get to 185. So 198 today, want to get to 185. So I now know where I am, and I now know where I want to be. This is standard for every project that you do. The gap is the difference between those two metrics. In this case, 13 pounds, right? 198 to 185, 13-pound loss is what I want to do. And then they talk about COPQ, the cost of poor quality. Or you can also use the value of the gap. Because think about it for a minute. The goal of every project is to close that gap. Where you are now and where you want to be, to close that gap. So that particular step, number 4, is basically, what's it worth to you? Why is it important to do it? What is that 13 pounds doing? And you can paint it in either direction. You could say, well, by being 13 pounds overweight, maybe your clothes are a little bit too tight. I might have to go shopping to buy new clothes because I'm starting to not fit anymore. Maybe you could look at, well, because I'm overweight, I'm getting more sick and I got to go to the doctor, which means I'm spending money at the doctor that I shouldn't have to spend because I'm overweight, right? So you can come up with all these different things. Why is this such an issue? Why is that gap an issue? Because remember, the goal is to close it. And because it's called continuous process improvement, you may not always close the whole gap. I may not be able to get rid of that whole 13 pounds because it could be a much bigger measurement. So sometimes the project's going to try to recoup that whole difference. Sometimes it'll close that gap by partial, like close it by 50%. with the long-term goal of capturing the rest. And in every project I've ever been involved with, there's always a deliverable date. When is this due by? Right? Because you never want to have the never-ending project. Right? That's, remember, just by the nature of calling it a project, projects are supposed to be temporary. They're supposed to last for a certain period of time, and once you've achieved your goal, that's it, it's done. So when do you expect to get that done? This is what the problem statement is all about. Oh, and then I haven't put it into a paragraph, right? Here's what I'm doing, here's why I want to get there, what this is going to do for me if I achieve that goal. There's always this part, the business case. You know, because just because there's a problem at work doesn't necessarily mean the company cares to do anything about it. So what do you have to do? You got to make your case to the business as to why it's important to address this. And that's what the business case is all about. And again, we talk about this more in class, but you want to say, here's the problem that we're facing, but you also want the company to buy into, let's do something about it. So this is where you're going to make your best argument as to why the business should care about this, why it matters to the business that we do something about this. I've written my fair share of business cases. Usually when I write them, I always do this. I think about the sensibilities of the person who's going to approve this. You know, you're going to get people who are proactive, people who are reactive, right? Those that are, you know, reactive, that don't want anything to go wrong. And, you know, you could write your business case and say, hey, here's what I'm at, like I'm at now. Here's where I want to be. Here's what we're trying to do. And if we don't do anything about this, here's all the things that could go wrong. This could go wrong. That could go wrong. This could be a problem. Do you want to be the person responsible for not taking action and having this happen? Or they like to get ahead of things. If we address this now, here's all the gains that we're going to have. This will improve. That'll improve. We'll save this. We'll make that. Don't you want to be the person leading that charge? So when you write a business case, I have found, at least in my experience, that knowing the sensibilities of the person, knowing kind of how they are, what makes them tick a little bit, really, really helps, because effectively, you want to build a business case where it's a no-brainer. When the person who's looking at it goes, yep, I see exactly why we're going to do this, get it done. You want that approval. Anyway, there's more to this. And if you'd like a copy of this, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a copy of this in the chat box. Just going to drop it in there. So if you are looking at the chat box in just a second under where Kelsey said going well, and thank you for that, you're going to see from me to you a file is going to appear. It's just a Word document. You're welcome to click on that. And by the way, in my classes, I have tons of templates like that, where we go through and we fill those things out and we try some of these things together. So you should be able to, in the chat box, click on it, right click, and download that. And of course, all of you have my email address. If you need it, if this doesn't work and you can't get it that way, email me. Say, hey, I was in your class, in your white belt thing today, and can you send me a copy of that project chart? I'll be happy to do so. I'll email you back. Okay. In the define phase, after going through all that project charter and taking a look at stuff, right, you're going to do things like, what is the value of the project? Who's on the team? What's the scope? You know, is this team-wide? Is this department-wide? Is it, you know, division? Is it company-wide? You'll see all that. You know, when things are due, the stakeholders, what's the voice of the customer, right? What matters the most to the customer, and also what matters the most to the business, to make sure those things jive. The measure phase, the goal of the measure phase is all about gathering the baseline. Because, you know, here's the deal. You can't truly change a process in the way you want to change it unless you know where you're starting. You know, it's like I was talking about the weight loss thing. It's like, how do I know if I'm making the right changes in my routine? You know, what I'm eating, exercise, sleep, all that. How do I know if I'm doing the right thing and moving my weight in the right direction if I didn't establish a baseline? Where did I begin at? That's what the measure phase is all about. Establishing that baseline, gathering all those possible X's, you know, and validating my assumptions. And also really important, this is extremely important right here, validate your improvement goals. And what does that mean? Well, if I'm sitting here and I'm trying to do an improvement of a process, I don't want to set a goal that's impossible to reach. Now, I know it's not really part of our training session today, but have you guys ever heard of this before, this acronym, SMART, when it comes to setting goals? Ever heard of that before? So part of that, right, is basically talking about how do you set goals and things that you should look for. And one of those things is the letter A, which is achievable or attainable. What they're trying to tell you to do is they don't want you to set those, save the world kind of goals. That's not what they're trying to do. They don't want you to set an impossible goal that you'll never reach. So when you validate your improvement goal, you're trying to say, hey, look, is my goal something I can do, either all at once or along the way? The analyze phase, is where we now have taken those X's, we've whittled them down to the critical few, right? And we're doing that here. And we're also making sure that there is a viable connection between the inputs and the outputs. So we're establishing verified drivers. We're trying to find out the real X's that connect to our Y. Determine the relationships, right? To ensure what like it says, what the root causes or drivers are of the improvement effort. So here we're gonna look again at the transfer function. We're gonna use different kinds of process maps. We'll use different tools. We'll validate that list of critical X's, because the whole point of this, right? Just like that big funnel earlier, you're brainstorming what you think is going on, you're getting down to the critical few, and you're doing all that because you want to get to the improve phase. The improve phase is where it's just like it sounds. You now design, test, and implement or improve your process. This is where you do it. This is where you start making it work. And you don't just roll this out to the masses. You do it in a small group. Like they mentioned right there, you do a pilot group, or if you're familiar with software, they call it beta testing, right? Give a few people an advanced copy of whatever software just to kind of make sure things are working the way they think it should. A lot easier than rolling it out to the masses and saying, oh, sorry, guys, we have a whole lot of problems with this. We're going to have to recall all of that. That's never a good look, is it? So here, we start getting into all the other aspects. We start testing it out, making sure it looks good, develop our plan for implementation or improvement. We look at our return on investment to make sure that this whole process has been worthwhile. We want to make sure everything is working the way it's supposed to. And then the most overlooked phase in any project, the control phase. See, the control phase is the last phase in DMAIC. This is where you document. And that one word is probably the biggest reason why people don't do it. You document. Because think about it for just a second. The whole point of going through and doing a process improvement project is to change the process, right? That's what you're trying to do. So when you're done, guess what happens? The process you used to do is gone. You're now looking at a new process. And people have to be taught how to perform it. What kind of metrics to look for, what kind of key indicators to look for, what kind of testing you should be doing to ensure that that process, it's new, it's improved, but it's also now the current process, the only process. So what you had before doesn't exist. Think about this for a second, just a brief second. Have you ever tried to lose weight before? I would imagine you guys have heard of weight loss companies. Like I know you've heard, there's some really famous ones out there, like, Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig and some of those, right? Everybody's heard of those companies before. They're nationwide. You hear them all over the place. So what do? Here we are in February. Let's say you're going to go this summer to a wedding, or you're going to a class reunion, and you're thinking, yeah, I want to look my best before I get in front of the cameras, or I see that classmate that said, you'll never make anything of yourself, right? It happens. And you want to lose that weight, fit into that dress, fit better into that suit or tuxedo. So you go to one of these companies and say, hey, I want to lose weight. And they're like, okay, give me some cash. Perfect. Now, let's take a look at the big picture here. Let's see where you are today. So first off, let's determine what you want to do and when you want to get it done by. Let's make sure we can do that. Okay. And if we can, let's establish where you are today. What led you to being where you are right now? What do you weigh? right? What's your BMI? What's your blood pressure? All that stuff that they use to measure people out. And let's figure out, what routine do you currently follow? How much do you eat on a daily basis? How much water are you drinking? How much sleep are you getting? Are you exercising, right? They look at all these different factors to see what led to you being where you are right now. Then they start analyzing all that and start saying, okay, let's stop doing that. Let's start doing this. Let's adjust this by a certain amount. They start putting you on a plan to follow, right? And each and every time, every day, every couple of days, every week, you have to report what you're doing, right? So you have a coach in your ear telling you, don't eat that, don't drink that. Come on, you can make it through the night without having that bag of Oreos. It'll be okay. Step away from the ice cream. It'll be fine. Stop drinking 10 Cokes a day. So you get that person in your ear telling you what to do. And guess what happens? You start losing the weight. You know, they work. These companies work great. They do exactly what they say they're going to do. They're in your ear. They're helping you out. They're coaching you along. They're getting you where you want to be. You know, more often than not, they're successful at helping you achieve your goal, which is why they're still in business. But then think about it for a second. What happens when you achieve your goals? What happens when you lose that 10, 15, 20 pounds and now you're ready to go for that, you know, that wedding, that reunion, whatever it is? What do people tend to do? Yes, I made it. They celebrate. I made the finish line. I got my weight where I want to be. Thank you very much for your help. Goodbye. People go out, they celebrate, they do their weddings, they do their reunions. You know, oh, I can have that piece of cake now. I can have that slice of pizza. Oh, would you please hand me that glass of wine or hand me that beer? So you kind of celebrate. It's natural to celebrate when you achieve a big goal. In this case, that's what it would be. But then what happens? People stop doing all the things that they did to get to that point. They start falling back into their old habits, eating the way they used to, drinking the way they used to, not exercising. And everything goes back to the way it was. The weight comes back, all of it. Why? Because people don't realize that you're making this change to where you want to be, right? And when you get there, you might have to tweak it a little bit, but for the most part, that's your process now. That's your routine. If you want to stay that way, just keep that weight off and do all that, this is your new process. What you used to do before doesn't exist anymore. Because think about it, if you go back to the old ways of doing things, what happens? You go back to the old results. This is where just about every project I've seen, here's an example of this. There's been a few times, right? I've been involved with numerous projects over the last like 12 years or so. And there have been a handful of projects where I've gone into a company, my company included, and I've gone, all right, here's what I'm here for. Here's what we're going to do, blah, blah, blah. And I get told, oh, yeah, we did Six Sigma on this, you know, about 2 or 3 years ago. Really? Great. Can I see your control plan? Right? The documentation that says, here's how the process is supposed to run. Here's supposed to do what kind of things to look for. And you know what I get? I get crickets. I get crickets. Silence. Oh, we don't have one of those. Well, gee, I wonder why you went back to what you were before. Because think about how it is in the business world, right? Do people today stay in the same job from the time they leave high school to the time they retire? It's not like when, you know, I was a kid, that was kind of the norm for your parents or your grandparents, you know, to be in a job straight out of high school all the way to retirement, working in the same company. Not today. People are all over the place. People are bouncing here and there. I mean, with the pandemic, I mean, that people now are being more selective with what kind of work they're doing, choosing where they want to work, what kind of work you want to do. I want to work from home, not so much in an office. I mean, there's all this going on. So those days are gone. You know what that means? When there's turnover like that in any normal company, then those people that know how to perform the process, if it's not documented, they might leave and take that knowledge with them. Right? They call that tribal knowledge, right? In a company where you get as long as I know this information, they can't fire me because I'm the only one that knows how to do this. Wrong. You're gone. I've seen that happen. It happened a lot to people when I worked at Experian. The people who were there 20, 25, 30 years thought, well, if I don't tell anybody what I do, then they can't replace me because they'll never be able to do the job. Yeah, they will. Anyway, the whole point of the control phase is to put all of these steps in place to maintain the gain or the solution for your process. Does this all make sense? I mean, honestly, a lot of this is common sense if you think about it. It's just not really looked at that way or explained in that fashion. I kind of figured, well, I'll take a second and talk about the weight loss example because this is what exactly how I talk about it in class. Whether it's yellow belt, green belt, or black belt, this is what I say. So you're getting some of the straight stuff straight out of the horse's mouth, right? Like they say. This is what I talk about, stuff like this. Because the goal here is I want you to understand. I want you to be able to relate to what some of this stuff is. And if you've never done a project before, I mean, everyone is familiar with food. Everyone has, at some point in life, has probably talked about losing weight or know somebody that has. And that's a very, very common process that everyone probably is familiar with. And I'll do that a lot in class too. I'll try to relate things like that. Roles and responsibilities. Before I get into this, guys doing okay still? Because believe it or not, it's 9:06. So we got a little bit less than an hour, a little over halfway through. Guys all still hanging out okay? Doing good? Hopefully you are. Hopefully you're enjoying the information and the way this goes. But this is a lot how I do my classes when I teach stuff like this. It's just us hanging out, having a conversation. We're talking about this stuff. Hopefully it's not boring. I try to keep it to make sure it's not a boring class. Although when you get into statistics and stuff like that, there's only so much excitement you can make out of that. All right, let's talk about the other part of this, roles and responsibilities. So there are several different roles in Six Sigma. And you know, we talk about the belts, right? The white, the yellow, the green, the black, the master black belt. Although technically there really isn't a white belt. It depends on the program that you go through. You know, depending on who the vendor is and the master black belt or master black belts in charge, they all have the same basic core curriculum that they have to follow to become, you know, these different belts and stuff. But depending on who it is, they may offer different levels of training. So the one that we work with, it's a company called Lean Sigma Corporation. They're the certifying group that does this. They're the ones who don't offer the white, but they offer yellow, green, black, and master black. Although at the end of our class today, I am going to give you a link. So if you want to take a little small 10-question practice test just to kind of see, hey, how did I do? You're certainly welcome to do so. And again, I'm not sure if there's a certificate at the end. They changed the system on me since the last time I saw it, so I don't know if it's the one in there or not. But it's a fun thing to try out if you'd like to. And I'll make sure you get the link at the end of the day. So within the hour. So there's belts, there's non-belts. Well, let's talk about the different belts. And why do they call them belts? You know, remember that guy, Bill Smith, father of Six Sigma? Big martial arts fan. And if you think about martial arts, think about like karate, jujitsu, taekwondo, kung fu, right? All the different ones that are out there. They have gis. And they have the belts, the different multicolored belts. Why? Because the belt is a way to visually be able to tell what that person's level of expertise is. You know, how much do they know? What is their knowledge level? Well, that's what the belt system is all about. Instead of saying, hey, you're a beginner, hey, you're intermediate, oh, you're an advanced person in Six Sigma, they use the belt system. That's why you hear about the classes, the yellow belt, the green belt. Just like in martial arts, those different colors signify different levels of knowledge. What do you know? And at the top of the food chain is the master black belt, considered the most experienced, educated, and capable Six Sigma expert. This is the person who's managed dozens of black belt projects. They can lead multiple projects at the same time while they are mentoring and certifying black belt and green belt candidates. The master black belt basically is the person that works with the companies to figure out where does Six Sigma fit. That's what they do. They work with the senior leadership to figure out, okay, how can Six Sigma support what you're trying to do here? The black belt, this is where I am, and I've been here since April 15th of 2013. The black belt is considered the most active and valuable experienced Six Sigma professional amongst all the belts. And why? Because while the master black belt says, hey, here's where Six Sigma can fit, the black belt's usually the one leading that charge, leading all the projects, right? They lead multiple projects. They train and mentor various green belt candidates, although I myself train and mentor green and black because I'm working on my master. So I've been given that permission to do so. So maybe you come back and see me again. The black belt is well-rounded in all these different areas: project management, statistical analysis, financial analysis, meeting facilitation, prioritization. Out of all those, you know what the most scary one is for everybody to do? Meeting facilitation. If you've ever had to stand up in front of a group of people to tell them, here's what we're doing, it's a scary thing. All eyes on you, waiting for information, waiting for the right information can be a scary thing. So anybody who gets involved with Six Sigma, where you have to lead a group of people, it can be a scary thing to kind of learn about. So I've done things like Toastmasters, and just so you know, I've been a Little League coach. I've been a Cub Scout leader, a Boy Scout leader. Currently, I'm a Girl Scout leader. So there's lots of different hats. I'm used to talking to people, and so this kind of helps me in this environment. But not everybody is in that boat. So taking, public speaking, those kinds of things, it helps to talk like that. And it's a little more tricky when you're talking to people you know versus people you don't. Anyway, the black belt, as you see there, a lot of different responsibilities. The green belt's not that far away from the black belt. Here's the big difference. There's actually two. Between black belt and green belt, a green belt's considered a less intense version of the black belt. So what does that mean? Instead of having to look at multiple projects at once potentially, a green belt literally only does one at a time. And usually it's going to be in their area, their sphere of influence, where they happen to be working at. As a green belt, yeah, you're going to be exposed to a lot of what the black belt sees, except you're not going to have as much of the higher end statistics to work with. And some of the different methodologies like design of experiment, or what we call DOE. So as a green belt, yeah, you're effectively doing most of what a black belt does, except one project at a time versus maybe 2 or 3 or 4 at a time. And of course, not as high on the statistical aspect of it. And a lot of times as a green belt, you're going to rely on some assistance from a black belt, as a coach, as a mentor to kind of guide you along. The yellow belt. The yellow belt is the person who understands the objectives, the responsibilities, and the methods of the project, right? So the yellow belt is the person who has a basic understanding about what they're doing. And this is kind of considered the leadership or the management perspective. That's what this is. So whenever I'm working with a company and I've got the leadership team that doesn't really know about Six Sigma a whole lot, I will give them effectively some yellow belt training, right? Because that way I want them to know kind of what we're going to be doing so that they can provide the proper level of support. That's what yellow belt training is all about. On the other side of the house, the non-belt side, you got the champions and the sponsors. So the champions are the people who are basically saying, let's do the project. They're chartering, they're funding, they're driving. They can be people, they can be groups, like an executive team can make this decision. They're the ones that drive the projects that the black belts and the green belts are doing. The champions and the sponsors have to have a basic understanding of Six Sigma, which is why we do a little bit of training with them ahead of time. The stakeholders, think about a stakeholder like a shareholder in a company, right? Somebody who has a vested interest in how well the project's doing, right? They may not necessarily utilize the project or they may not be involved, but they certainly care about how well it performs. It's like we talked about McDonald's earlier, right? It's like you may not ever eat there, but if you own stock, you certainly care about how well they're doing because it affects your bottom line. Subject matter experts. Yeah, these are people I rely upon a lot in the real world, right? A subject matter expert basically is the person who does the job, right? They're the ones that are knee deep in doing the job each and every day. So as a Six Sigma practitioner, these are the people I rely upon the most because they're the ones that can tell us what's realistic, what can we do, what can't we do? And they're the ones that can show us the current process, show us what's going on. Take us on a process walk, or what's known as a Gemba walk, Gemba, a Gemba walk. Gemba means go to the real place. So you go to do this Gemba walk, you observe the process, have them explain what's going on. Because, if you do a process over and over again on a daily routine, there's a lot of time, and maybe you do the same thing too. You might become or get on automatic pilot. You're doing the same thing over and over and over again every day. And if you try to explain it, you might say something different than what the person is actually doing. So we do talk about that in our class, talk about, process walks, talk about what they call a rapid process improvement event, which is also called a Kaizen event. Those are things we're going to look at. And Elaine, I saw you turn on your microphone. Did you have a question for me?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I
That's
switched
okay.
over.
That's all right. I saw you turn on your mic and I was like, oh, question. So, all right, if you're good, just go ahead and mute it, or I can mute it for you either way. Thank you. These are the 4 belts, folks. Master black belt, green belt, yellow belt. And of course, the other side of the house, the champions, the sponsors, the stakeholders, the subject matter experts. All right, give me a second here. I'm just trying to make sure I'm looking at my slides just to make sure I'm not like going too far with this. All right, lean. The history of lean. So lean, as I mentioned, been around for a while. Started off in the early, as it says there, early 1400s, but it really kind of took off with Henry Ford, right? Who created the first mass production system in 1913 by combining standard parts, conveyors, and workflow, basically the Model T. And as I said earlier, Kachiro Toyota and Taiichi Ohno over at Toyota, they're the ones that took those concepts and turned them into something different, right? Value stream, takt time, Kanban. These came up with all these different concepts. And today we know that as the Toyota production system. In fact, the term lean manufacturing has been around since like around the 90s. Maybe you've heard of it before. Okay, last few slides in here before I start wrapping up. Let me just check and see where I'm at. Hold on. Okay, I just want to see how many slides we have left. So we have about roughly 10 maybe at the most. And then what I'd like to do for a moment is see if you have any questions. And I thought what I would do too is briefly kind of show you, hey, here's a basic outline of what our class, our green and black belt courses look like. And then give you a link. So if you want to download this deck to keep it for yourself, you can. There's also some information about in there too. If you are interested down the road of taking, yellow belt, green belt, black belt, who to contact, right? You can either, I'll get into that in a bit, but it's all in here too. Anyway, let's talk about the 7 deadly muda for a second, as we get to this last portion of the training here. So the Japanese word for waste is muda. Right. So when you hear about the 7 deadly muda, they're talking about the 7 most commonly recognized forms of waste. There's defects, overproduction, overprocessing, inventory, motion, transportation, and waiting. A defect is a mistake, a flaw, an imperfection of some kind. So something is wrong in the process itself. So a defect or defectives, they're a waste. Why? Because if something is defective or there's a defect there, it usually is going to require rework during production, or if it gets to the customer, right, the customer, you're going to have to make it right. So you're going to replace something or you're going to repair something, right? So all that leads to waste, right? Think about if you have something that's wasteful and it gets to the customer, you wasted the time of you and the customer producing that product. You have lost the resources, right? You have wasted resource, whatever it is you created, that's no longer valid. It's no longer any good. And if you have to replace something, now instead of having maybe selling 2 items, you only sold 1 because one of them you had to recall. So you lose money. So defects is the very first one and one of the most common ones you see out there. Overproduction, making more of something than you need, right? That's what overproduction is. So why is it such a big deal? Because if you overproduce something and you don't get it out the door, guess what you have to do? You got to store it. So you'll need the inventory, you'll have transportation, you'll have to move it around. Of course, you're waiting for these things to get out the door. So it's basically money on a shelf. So overproduction can lead to other types of waste. Overprocessing, more work is done than is required by the next process step, operation or consumer. It can be either overcapacity or what they call overkill. I mean, think about it. If you wanted to do a home budget, right? Overproduction would be, or processing would be going out and buying the latest, greatest computer with a copy of Office on it, just so you can do a simple budget that you could have done with a piece of paper and a calculator. It's doing way more than you have to do. Inventory doesn't sound like it's waste, but it is. I mean, if you look at that picture, they're mentioning right there, think about all the time, the materials, the logistics that went into making that happen, to make that inventory. It's basically money sitting on the shelf. So if this is you, right, in your business, how would you feel with having that money sitting there, just waiting? Because think of all the things that could go wrong. Motion. Another form of waste occurring as a result of poor setup, configuration, and operating procedures. Motion is the unnecessary extra movement of people, right? Repetitive motions, bending, reaching, stretching, walking. That's what motion is. Transportation, the unnecessary movement of product or goods, moving things from point A to point B, from one place to another, where it does nothing to transform the product for the customer, right? And you have the opportunity to break it. You know how I remember this? Transportation and motion, the difference? And I'm going to date myself here, but think back for a second to the song, The Locomotion. Maybe you know it, right? Everyone's doing a brand new dance now. Come on, baby, do the locomotion, that song. Well, there's several versions of it, and every one of them is kind of upbeat. So it kind of gets you moving, kind of gets you going, gets you dancing. So when you think about motion, think about the locomotion, people moving, it's people. The other one, moving product. That's what transportation is. And then, of course, waiting, the most obvious form of waste. Usually it's an upstream problem. I'm waiting for something to get done before I can do my part. That's what waiting is. It can be caused by inefficiencies, by bottlenecks, or a poorly designed workflow within our process, our value stream. Lean and Six Sigma, right? Lean's all about eliminating waste, process flow, pull system, easy visual approach. Six Sigma, eliminating defects, improving process yield, making the system capable. And you utilize a rigorous analytical approach to get there. These two things have been working together for quite some time to provide quality and value for the customer and efficiency for the business. So this is if you're thinking about, yeah, I want to do some green belt training or black belt training or yellow belt training, one, you could contact this email address, right? This is tmott, M-O-T-T, at nhlearninggroup.com. Of course, you guys all have my email address as well, which I gave you earlier. Okay, which I gave you earlier, gchapa at nhlearninggroup.com. Or, when you came to this class, you were signed up through an account executive. So if you're not sure who that is, you can always ask me and I'll be happy to tell you who it is. I can tell you on the side or, once we get done with all this. So basically the account executive is the person that helped you sign up to get into this particular training session. All right, so pause for just a second. Let me do this. Let me bring up this document. And this is just going to give you a picture of all of the topics you'll see in our class. So if you're thinking about, okay, our website gives you some stuff to work with, but this gives you more detail. So Chris is asking, how many years does it typically take to achieve proficiency and prerequisites for each belt? It really depends on the amount of projects you get involved with. When you get certified, yeah, you're going to have the certification that says that you have the knowledge of a green belt, knowledge of a black belt, but that's different than I have done the work. So, I mean, I've been working with Six Sigma for like 11 years now, roughly 11, 12 years. And I would say after like the first year or two of being involved in projects, it really, really kind of took off. So, I mean, when you first start, even if you're a black belt, it really, really benefits to you to tag along, if you will, be involved in a project, but not as the leader, but also like support. So when I first got started, the master black belts I learned under, she would include me in projects. And even if I really didn't do a whole lot, maybe I did some simple data gathering or I made a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint presentation for it, I was able to kind of see in action how that went, right? How the process behaved, how it performed. But it does help it's like any other job, it's like going to college and getting a degree, but you still don't have the practical application yet until you actually get into your job. So for me, I don't know, it took maybe like maybe about 2 years or so to kind of really feel where I was really comfortable, where I was leading projects. But in that first 2 years, I was involved with about three, I think, three or four projects. So it depends on who you get involved with. The projects, yeah. So I was just trying to answer your question there. I just saw it pop up. So yeah, I would say, anywhere from like 3 to 5 projects, just kind of getting your feet wet, getting involved with it, understanding how it goes. It's like anything else. If you might learn about it, but until you actually get your hands in there and get dirty with it, it's different, the practical application versus the schooling side of it. You know what I mean? So, and the projects, it depended on what the project is. Some projects are going to be tied to money. In fact, a fair amount of them are. Some are going to revolve around maybe you're trying to prevent loss. Maybe you're trying to increase throughput, right? It depends on what the project is as to whether or not, how much experience you're gaining. My suggestion usually is, if you know somebody else who's certified as well, who's already done some work, kind of tag along, kind of pick their brain, ask some questions. That's what I did. And by the way, all of you, if you decide to go through training, you will have me as a resource. And that's the way it works with the other black belts as well. There's about a handful of us that teach these classes. So I usually make myself available to every student, because once you get out there and you start doing this, you may not be quite sure where to go, especially first time out of the gate. So I usually provide myself as a resource for that. And even though you guys aren't my students here as far as a full training class, you're welcome to contact me here too. I know you're going through this little snippet of Six Sigma with me, but I'd be happy to answer what questions I can. Okay, so I don't know, Chris, if that helps at all. And the timing, how long the projects are can vary. It depends on what the company needs and how much time you had to get it done. Those things matter. It's like any other regular project. Some will be really small, some will be bigger. It really depends. Every project is unique. So I can't really give you a full answer on that. So the way it works is this. When you get into Six Sigma training, right, when you get your certification, the course itself covers all the topics that the certifying body wants you to know, right? For example, Lean Sigma Corporation. So as I'm going through doing the class, you're going through the knowledge. And this is what this is, these slides. They talk about, the different topics you're going to learn in class. And once you get through that, you're going to be registered during the class to an online portal that Lean Sigma Corporation owns. And the purpose of the portal is to allow you to do the practice exams. Your final exam is there, and you have to pass your final exam with an 80% or higher. So they give you all the different requirements that have to be done. Once you've done all of that, as a green belt, that's all that's required. Finishing the class, doing the online work, passing your exam. Once all that's done, you're a green belt. There's no project involved for green belt level training. For black belt, we used to have a project component. However, they've changed it. And a lot of the reason it's changed is because of COVID, right? So we can't really go into too many companies and do work like that. So what they've done, since a lot of people are working from home too, what they've done is they said, okay, we want you to pick a project you would work on, and you're going to provide some of the elements, like provide a project charter, provide a fishbone diagram, provide a high-level process map. They'll ask you for 3 or 4 or 5 things. And this is a master black belt I work with in our corporate office, who once a student's done and has done the online legwork and passed their exam, you get handed over to that person. And what he does is he works with you on those aspects. It's just kind of trying to say, hey, look, do you know what you're doing with these different tools? And then once you've met those objectives, you become a certified black belt. Now, getting the certification, right, is not the same thing as practical application, because it's like going to college and getting an associate's degree or getting a bachelor's degree, where you're going in and you're going through the training, but you're not necessarily in the real world, right, in the live world where you're actually doing the work. So that's kind of how I would equate that. Darren's asking, what would be the main difference between a Six Sigma belt certification and, say, a project management professional? The difference is big, I think. Project management professional, usually for PMPs, you have to already have the project work behind you. You have to have a certain number of hours, usually it's in the thousands, I can't remember if it's like 4,000, 5,000, something. It's a large number of actual project hours where you put in time on a project and you've done all the different aspects of it. Then you also have to go through their rigorous certification process, right? You have to take a test through the PMI, right? Project Management Institute, become certified that way. And then every 3 years or so, you have to recertify, right? 3, 4, 5 years to recertify. So, and you got continuing education components all that go along with it. Now, if you've got a college degree, I think they cut the hours down in half. But a big difference is for PMP, you have to have those project hours already in place before you can even get the certification. Six Sigma, right? You don't, right? Six Sigma, right? PMP, CAPM, right? Right, certified associate project manager, right? Those certifications require that. For Six Sigma, it's getting the certification and then you go out and you start applying it. So, and also too, the test requirements are a bit different, right? And it's not proctored. You know, with PMP, you have to take a proctored test, right? Somebody over your shoulder, kind of watching what's going on, you know, that kind of thing. For Six Sigma, you can take it from the comfort of your home to get that certification. So Darren, hopefully that kind of helps a little bit. All right, let me briefly just kind of mention what the topics are. I'll do this super quick because I know we only have so much time. But what you're going to see here, these are the topics. The exercise book for the green belt and the black belt course are both over 1,000 slides. There's like 1,022 for green belt and about 1,300 for black belt. So kind of like you just saw with the slides that we went through, there are the 5 different phases and here's all the topics. So as I do this real quick, everything that's not in yellow is covered in both courses. When I get to something like this where you see yellow, that means that's additional to the black belt course, okay? Because effectively, all these courses, the black belt, the green belt, the yellow belt, the green belt and the yellow belt are subsets of the black belt. So we're just taking information away to shrink it down to a smaller course. So you get a lot of the same information, just not all of it that you would see at the next level. So in your classes, you'll start off with the define phase, kind of like we did in our class today. We talked about Six Sigma, the history of Six Sigma. We discussed more processes. You know, what is a process? What's the voice of the customer? We discussed more of Pareto analysis. Maybe you've heard of Pareto charts. And then we discussed the project charter, the business case. We start talking about project team selection, risk management, risk planning, or project planning. And we dive more into the lean fundamentals. So I took elements of that define phase, and that's what you saw over those 50 slides. So instead of having 50, you'd probably go like around 200 slides in this first session. The measure phase, oh, and by the way, in the green belt course, 4-day class, define would be Monday, measure would be Tuesday, analyze Wednesday, improve and control Thursday. For the black belt, it would be 1 phase per day, define, measure, analyze, improve and control. And you'll see why in just a second. In the measure phase, where we establish our baseline, here's where we start doing cause and effect diagrams or fishbone diagrams. We start learning more about process mapping, how to create these different types of maps, you know, value streams, how to do a SIPOC, how to, you know, create a swim lane, right? Those are all part of, you know, mapping the process itself. Because if you can put the process on paper so people can see it in a picture type format, if you can do that, that's a huge asset, because one of the biggest issues when working with projects is getting everybody on the same page, right? That's what you want to do. So we'll discuss also FMEA, what's called the failure modes and effects analysis. We'll get into the theory of constraints, and then we'll start our journey into the world of statistics. We'll start talking about basic statistics, descriptive statistics. We'll start looking at distributions, you know, bell curves, what's normal, what's non-normal. We'll do graphical analysis, things like histograms and scatter plots and box plots and run charts. We'll discuss the MSA, the measurement system analysis, to understand how is your process performing? How is the measurement system that you're going to use? How reliable is it? You know, I was talking about earlier about losing weight, right? When you go to lose weight, if you're anything like me, I usually go into my bathroom and I step on the scale. But here's the question. If you're weighing yourself from day to day to day, do you always try to replicate the way you do the measurement? Put the scale in the same place each and every time, calibrate it down to 0, seeing roughly the same type of day, probably before you ate, wearing the same amount of clothing, so you minimize the variation from measurement to measurement to measurement. That's what that's for. to ensure that your measurements are reliable, because we do data-driven analysis. And if your data is not reliable, then what's the point? It's not trusted. You can't trust it. We'll even get into process capability, which tells us how our process is capable of performing in the future based upon how it did in the past. In the analyze phase, as you can see, the things in yellow are additions that you would see in black belt. Everything that's not in yellow is in both classes, the green and the black. So we'll get into inferential statistics. Now we're talking about sampling, using samples to help us understand what an entire population or all the data happens to be. So we'll talk about sampling techniques, sample size, and we'll discuss hypothesis testing, right? Coming up with a hypothesis to what we think something is. And every hypothesis has a true or false. Either something is or something is not. And we'll use data to help us determine the validity of those hypotheses. We'll get into hypothesis testing for normal data. Maybe you've heard of the one sample t-test or the one sample variance or the one-way ANOVA. There's also your non-normal side where you're getting into Mann-Whitney, Crostal-Wallace, Moore's median, and a bunch of other tests in there as well. Improve phase, we talk about simple and multiple linear regression. So correlation and causation, we get into XY diagrams, we start talking about regression equations and residuals. Simple linear regression simply means 1y, 1x. Multiple linear regression, 1y, multiple x's or multiple inputs. And then all the stuff in yellow is what gets added for the black belt course. Things like your design of experiments, your full factorial and your fractional factorial experimentation. The control phase is the same for both classes, for the green and the yellow and the black. Where we learn about lean, we talk about 5S. Maybe you've heard of 5S or 6S. We talk about Kanban. We talk about Poka-yoke. We get into statistical process control. We look at control charts, right? Tell us what the process and how it's performing right now and in the past. And there's a whole slew of those that you see right there. And at the very end, we get into control plans. We talk about cost benefit analysis, right? Return on investment or ROI. You'll see all those. We'll talk about the elements of your control plan, your response plan, right? Because not every process performance is expected. So when something starts to go wrong, what steps should you take to get your process performing back the way it's supposed to? These are all things that you'll see if you decide, hey, I want to take the green belt class, the yellow belt class. The yellow will be just less material than that. The one document I showed you was kind of a flip between the green and the black. Okay. Again, green belt's 4-day, black belt's 5-day. You know what I can do too, real fast while I'm thinking about it. Take a look at this. This is the portal, right, that I was telling you about. When you get registered, you're going to get signed up for this. We'll get you logged in. And once you get in here, you're going to find that in the portal, once you find the portal, that you're going to have all kinds of tools to work with. There's courseware in here. So if I clicked on courseware, you'd see all the different PDFs. So there's PDFs for the yellow belt, the green belt, the black belt, right? You can download these PDFs for the different classes. There's templates. So when you come out here, you would see templates that you could work with. Again, you would register for this in class. And these are all different templates for all of these different kinds of tools you could use. One of those is that project charter Word document I was showing you a few minutes ago. There's also going to be in here some data files. We use a piece of software in our class called Sigma XL, which is like a mini tab light, which lets you do, crunching the numbers and making charts and stuff like that. So there's data files to support that. There's roadmaps in here. The purpose of a roadmap is simply to kind of show you a bit about what DMAIC is or control charts. In fact, if I open this real quick, this will give you an idea what it looks like. And by the way, since I am talking about it right now, I'm going to put this same roadmap, this DMAIC roadmap, in the chat box. So if you want to go get that from me like you did the project charter earlier, I'll throw this in here for you just because, but it talks about in each phase what the purpose is, what are some of the key tools and the key outputs you might see for every phase. So it should be popping up any second now under where Kelsey said, sorry, I must have bumped it. You should see my name and you should see a little PDF called DMAIC Roadmap that you're welcome to go and download. And again, if for whatever reason you can't get it there and it's not working, you can always email me. I'd be happy to send it to you. There's a glossary in here, a glossary of terms. So different terms you might see in your exams would be here as well. And there's a discussion forum and all the kinds of fun stuff. And there also too is the certification classes. This is the portal I was telling you about. Because in this portal here, you would go through each individual phase. You would look at the different bits of information. There's a test you take at the end of every phase. And of course, there's the green belt certification exam you would take at the very end. So the green belt test, just so you know, it's 150 questions and you have to pass it with an 80% or higher. It's you get 2.5 hours to take a 2.5 hour test. Most people get it done in about an hour and a half, hour 45. And the students that I've had usually pass with around a 90 to 95, somewhere in that range. Okay. Oh, and you get 2 shots to pass it. So that means you got to get 120 out of 150 correct. For the black belt course, it's 175 questions in 3 hours. And that also is a passing with the 80% or higher. So you'd have to get 100 and I think it's 140 out of 175 correct. I believe that's right. And you get 2 shots to take that test, 2 opportunities. And I do cover in my classes test taking tips, the best way to do this, right? Make sure you have your deck open, right? The book that comes with the class, because it's an open book test. So you can have the website on one page, on one browser, you can have the book on the other browser. And I do talk about how do you find the information? Where do you go? How does it work? I cover all of that in our classes, just to make sure that you know exactly where to go and what to do. Okay, is that all making sense? Again, if you have more questions about this, you can email that address right there on the screen. You can always contact me as well. And I have one more thing for you before you get out of here, but I wanted to kind of just pause for a second to see how you guys are doing, see what you thought about all this and how did it work and so on, so forth. Yeah, and that's what this class is. It's supposed to be an introduction into the class. I wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance to see what this stuff was and how it all worked. And what I'm doing right now is I'm actually making sure that I got the link right, because I want to give you some information that you can use, which happens to be the slides. And I want to make sure you got what you need. So if you give me 1 second, that's the link that's in the chat box down there in the bottom. If you want to click it, what that'll do is this. When you click the link in the chat box, it'll do this. It'll open up my OneDrive account, and you're going to see in here this. You're going to see it's going to open up the slide deck that I just covered here in our class. So I made it where anybody can get to it. It's a read-only thing. So if you want to go download a copy of this, you certainly can, but there's the same 49 pages that you just saw with me here in our training. Okay, make sure you guys have a copy of that in case you need it. I'll even put this too in the chat box so you can download it there if you want to go get it as well. So that's out there to begin with. Okay, so you're welcome to download that, play around with that. You can always come back to it later on. The other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to give you 2 last things. Number 1, I guess I should ask the question, how did you guys do with all this training? Did you guys do all right with this overview of the class itself? By the way, Chris, to answer your question, I was in the drum corps and in the band. So yes, I was a musician, although I was an MP for a little bit too. So during Desert Storm and Desert Shield. So did all right with this? All right, so here's what I'd like to do. Could you do me a quick favor? And I'm going to borrow one of your accounts. So Kelsey, I'm going to borrow your account just for a second. Don't worry, nobody else is going to see this, but I want you guys to take a look at this. If you could do something for me. First, I'm going to give you a link. If you want to go in a bit, you don't have to do it right now, but if you want to go take this white belt test, this is the link for the certification test. So I know they said they weren't going to give you any kind of test, but if you want to go practice this, you certainly can. And this is the link you would use for that certification. So, and I'll put this in the chat box as well, just so you have it. But this link will take you to SurveyMonkey. And this particular link is solely for the white belt practice test. Okay. By the way, when you click on that link, it'll take you to a page that'll do this. It'll take you out. This is what the page looks like. You would fill this information, and then it'll ask you some questions. What does the M stand for in DMAIC? And it gives you some different things to look at. And at the very bottom, you would just simply submit the test. So it's only like a 10-question test if you want to check that out. You don't have to do it right this second. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that if you would please do me a favor, and before you go, this is only available for the students that are in the class at the moment, right? And I'm going to use Kelsey's account for just a second. When you were in this page, did you happen to notice down here at the bottom, there's a link that says end of class survey. So here's why I'm going to ask you to do this. When you go to the bottom of this page, right, where you're logged in, down here at the bottom, it says end of class survey, and there's a launch button. When you click the launch button, it's going to open up a window, and it's going to ask you to fill out a survey. The survey takes like 5 minutes. And the reason for it is to let my company know how you enjoyed this short training session with me. You get to answer questions like, how was the training? How was the instructor? How was the information? You get to grade every part of this on a scale up to 10. So personally, I'm hoping that you enjoyed this short time with me. And when you get to the 4 or 5 instructor questions, you thought I was worthy of 10s. You'll answer the question, keep going, keep going, keep going. When you get to the very end, you're going to submit the survey, and it's going to ask you, would you like to close your window? Go ahead and do that. Now, here's the other thing that they may not have told you. For simply attending the class and filling out the survey, you get a certificate of completion for being here. So once you finish the eval and you close it, here's what you'll do. See in the upper left corner where it says my training, my transcript, and event schedule. If you click where it says my transcript, it'll take you to a page that looks just like this. And on this page, you'll see this demo class name. If you move over to the right, there's going to be a little certificate sitting right over there on the right-hand side. Little blue certificate with like a little ribbon on it. If you click it, it'll ask you what kind of template do you want to use. One of them says the 2021 full graphic version. Give it a click. It'll download the certificate. It'll save it to your computer, and you will have a certificate for being in this class today. Okay, but please take a second, fill out that evaluation for me. The reason for doing it is just to make sure that, at least from my company side, that you enjoyed the training, you found it to be some useful information, and that, that you did all right with this. That's the real reason for doing that survey. Okay, all right. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to put in here, I'm going to go back to the very beginning. Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave this one slide here. So this is the next step slide. Again, if you need to contact me for whatever reason, feel free to do so. But I'm going to stop the recording and tell all of you, thank you for being here. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes. So I'm not leaving right away, but I am going to stop the recording. So that way, if you want to come back later on, check it out, you can. Oh, almost forgot. I guess I should tell you where to find the recording in case you ever want to come back and do this. Okay, look, all right, look at my screen for a second. This is Kelsey's screen still as a student. So here's where you would find it. Do you see in the upper left corner how it says New Horizons? And then right there on the left-hand side, it has this. It says right there, recordings, just like that. When you click on the word recordings, it's going to take you to a page. It'll look just like this. Now, there's going to be a third one of these. You'll see it says White Belt Demo Day, White Belt Demo Day. I'm going to rename those to say don't pay attention to this. There'll be a third one. When that third one appears, I'll mention this, the actual recording. You're going to come all the way to the right. You're going to find this. You're looking for the word watch. And when you click on that, it'll take you to a page that where you can actually watch the recording, right? You'll see an agreement that says, hey, do you agree to use this for yourself and nobody else? You say yes. You're going to get a Zoom player in the window, right? The Zoom player itself allows you to see what the recording looks like. And just so you know, this is kind of what it looks like. When you click on that word watch on the right-hand side, it'll do this. It'll pop up a box like this, basically saying, do you agree to use this for yourself, nobody else? Don't copy it, don't share it. When you click accept, it'll load the Zoom player in a window like that. And if you click the play button in the bottom left corner, it'll start loading up this little menu on the right. You'll see 2 tabs, audio transcript. Everything sent into a microphone today has been dictated and written out by Zoom. Also, after clicking that little play button, you'll start seeing my slides right here on the screen, as well as me, the video. And if you click chat messages over here on the right side, everything said back and forth in the chat box will be there. Oh, final thing, lower left corner, that play button, when first time you click it, it plays. Click it again, it'll pause. Click it again, it'll play. And the blue bar you see right above that, you can click it and drag it back and forth to fast forward or rewind to any portion of the recording. And these recordings will be available for the next 6 months, 6 months from today's date. Okay, now that I've done that, I'll stop the recording. I just want to leave that in there in case you need to see it again. All right.